It is the world's largest humanitarian crisis, yet not one we hear about. Since April of 2023, the war in Sudan has raged on. It is a power struggle between the country's military and paramilitary groups known as the Rapid Support Forces. Millions are affected, half of those are children. And a warning that the details and images in our next story may be disturbing for some viewers, but they are part of what is being experienced by millions. At least 150,000 people have died. More than 12 million have been displaced and forced to flee. The United States has labeled this conflict a genocide. Multiple organizations have called this the world's largest humanitarian crisis. Award-winning journalist, author, and filmmaker Michelle Shepard recently returned from Chad, located on the border with Sudan. And she's joining us this morning to share what you saw, what you learned with the rest of the country. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm curious, what did you see? What did you hear when you were on the border?
Yeah, it was, so as you mentioned, I was on the border in the refugee camps. This massive camp that actually wasn't even supposed to be a camp. It was known as a transit camp. Refugees started coming over the border just 5 kilometers from Sudan. There's now 200,000 refugees that are there.
In this one
overcrowded
makeshift camp.
Yeah, and I was lucky enough to go with Médecins Sans Frontières. They gave me an opportunity, Doctors Without Borders who have a presence there. They're kind of keeping the camp going. But the stories, honestly, Anne-Marie, every shelter that I went to, the stories just got more and more horrific. It's incredible what people have gone through to survive that war, to get there. And as you said in the opening, that we're just not really hearing about it. It's really not being covered at all.
Well, which is why the work that you are doing on the border is so important, because you can open it up and people can understand. One of the things I found so disturbing in some of the information you brought back is how sexual assault is being used as a weapon of war.
Yeah, it's really the famine that's taking place, so starvation, the sexual assaults, as you mentioned, and the indiscriminate killing, but also the targeting of civilians just generally is so horrific. It's in many wars, civilians are caught in the crossfire. You know, this horrible term of collateral damage. But here they're really being targeted. And the women in particular, the stories I heard of sexual violence were incredible. We were in one shelter where it's women, everybody in that shelter had gone through some sort of rape or sexual violence. They were all survivors. The stories were horrific. They were also powerful. They were incredible women that they're, doing so well, helping each other. But I interviewed this one woman who had gone through a rape after her husband had been killed. She's very powerful. She's helping other women. Right after that, a little girl came. She was 13 years old. She had a 5-month-old baby. And she
At 13?
From a rape that she experienced. And she was so clearly traumatized. And during the interview, I thought, gosh, I feel bad interviewing this minor. So I said to the other women, can we reach her mother? Is there a guardian here? And Anne-Marie, the woman I had just interviewed, she said, oh yeah, that's my daughter. So suddenly you're like, wow, this is 2 generations of sexual violence. There's this little baby girl, very loved, very looked after, a lot of love in that room. But you just realize just how devastating it is.
These are stories that sometimes we try to contextualize by putting in numbers. And when you hear the numbers, to be the world's largest humanitarian crisis, you've talked to people at the border. What are the stories that illustrate that? What are the human stories behind those big numbers that we hear about? 12 million displaced, 10 million kids not in school.
Yeah, I mean, that's the problem. We can't really almost fathom a crisis so big. So that's what we try and do as journalists, just tell the individual stories. I did want to highlight in my reporting, some of the sexual assaults. I'm sorry that these stories are so hard to hear, but one other one that really stuck with me was a family who had fled as the town was overtaken by the RSF forces. One of the battling forces here, they killed the woman's father. She was 20 years old. They had to leave him there. And then as they were fleeing, I said to her, well, what did the soldiers say to you after they killed your father and you have to leave him on the road? They said, turn around and run. Wow. And Anne-Marie, these women ran as the soldiers mounted their vehicles, those big 4x4s with the automatic rifles, and just started shooting. And the fact that we're not hearing about these stories is in part by design, because the warring parties have actually shut down cell phones, shut down the internet inside the country. So the only way that we're knowing about this is through these stories of these survivors. And in some cases, there was a terrible slaughter at the end of October in a town called El Fasher. The attackers actually were posting the killings.
Wow.
And posting on social media. If we didn't have the story of the survivors, if we didn't have those, if we didn't have satellite images, we wouldn't know about this at all.
Right.
So it's a really, it's a terrible crisis. And yeah, thanks for bringing it to your audience. I'm sorry this is tough listening in the morning, but I mean, this is something that needs to be talked about.
This is part of what we do, is report on what is happening. So you, you know, journalists like yourself or MSF who are there on the ground doing what they can in a health and healthcare capacity. What about the international response to what is happening right now? We hear a lot about conflict in other countries that don't have these numbers and atrocities behind it. So what about Canada's response? What about the international response to what is happening?
It's lacking, you know, to say it quite plainly.
Is that because of lack of access to information? I imagine they know.
They know. I mean, it's a few different reasons. One is that we call this a civil war, and at its core it is between these battling generals. But it's really a proxy war. A lot of countries are getting rich off this war. Sudan has gold, oil, agriculture. It's very important where it's geographically placed. So the UAE is backing one side and getting billions from the gold. Saudi Arabia is involved. Russia is backing both sides to try and pick a winner. I mean, it's so, when you start looking at the other countries involved, they're part of the process to negotiate a ceasefire, some of them, but they don't want that, many of them. Because they are getting rich off this war. So that's one of the issues. But you know, a country like Canada, we could be stepping up more. We used to step up more. And I mean, you and I are old enough to remember when Darfur was a name that we associated with genocide. I mean, George Clooney went to Sudan. You know, there used to be all sorts of marches for it. And we just don't have that anymore. And it's really tragic because the civilians there are paying the cost.
Now, you've told us some of the stories. Finally, what do you want Canadians to do with this information, with this awareness they now have?
Well, I mean, really just by listening to this, thank you. I mean, just by learning about the war, I think that's important. You know, talking to your politicians, taking action, supporting groups like MSF, you know, just being engaged and caring about it. People feel very powerless, I get that, but you can do something.
Not ignoring and not turning away.
Yeah.
All right, Michelle Shepard, award-winning journalist, author, and filmmaker, thank you for the work not only that you did, but are ongoing and doing on this story.
Thanks.
If you like that video, make sure to subscribe to the Your Morning YouTube feed, where you can find all kinds of new content posted every weekday morning.